Last weekend, my wife and I were in Nashville. My wife and I were in Nashville last weekend. And when we got into town on Friday, we had lunch at a restaurant called Milk and Honey. 5 stars, would recommend, but that's not what this video is about. Our server, like many of the servers and people working in restaurants in Nashville, were trying to get into the music business. And this young woman was beautiful. She was smart. She was funny. She had great personality. She writes, she plays, and she sings. And we checked out some of her stuff on Spotify. And I don't listen to that kind of music, but it sounded great. It was well produced. It was clever. She's got a great voice. She writes good lyrics. She's doing everything she can, she said, to try to get better and make her next project sound better than the last project. And that's admirable. But when we looked at what we saw, when we listened to what we heard, and then we looked at the streaming data, it was like, wow, why isn't this getting more play? It dawned on me. It's just another example of how being good enough just isn't good enough. You have to do something to stand out. She looked and sounded the part. And according to the streaming stats, it didn't matter. And I started thinking, you know what? And this sounds so bad to say, but I think it's true. There's probably 1,000 people like her doing the same thing. They check all the boxes. And checking all the boxes, despite what you may have been told, especially in a sales role, is just not good enough anymore. For the last 10 years, you've been told that if you've got a good website and you've got a social media presence and you've got a personal brand, whatever that means to whoever is telling you that, then people will find you. They support that with data that so many of the people you're trying to reach that you want to sell to, they don't want to talk to you until they're ready to buy. But they're not coming. They're not just finding you, because when they look for you and you check all the same boxes that everybody else checks, they find 1,000 of you. And they don't know what to choose. So when they do, they choose the one that's cheapest. They choose the one their friend bought. They choose the one that just seems safe, and quite frankly, at that rate, you throw a dart at a board and whichever one you hit sounds good enough and you move on. That doesn't sound like a recipe for success, does it? So what I want you to think about is, how do you stand out? Because it's not marketing. Listen, a marketing spend game is it's just the reverse of the race to the bottom, right? And not in that it's a race to the top. It's just another way to look at it. If you race to the bottom by just lowering your price so that you win on price, well, now you're giving away all your value and your profit. Well, it's very similar when you spend more on marketing to put yourself in more places in front of more people. Well, now you're just spending your profit before it comes. It's just another version of the same song. So what do you need to do to stand out? Well, I think you need to get a little more creative. And not just creative with how you put yourself in front of people, but you need to be creative with what you put in front of people. How are you different? How does that matter? And what are the outcomes that you can provide that nobody else can? And I can hear a lot of you right now saying, well, wait a second, Jeff, we all get to the same outcome. We sell software that looks a little different than this software, looks a little bit different than this. We sell widgets that look a little bit different than these widgets that look, but at the end, you still have a working machine, you still have a functioning business. Okay. But the way you do it means something. Your approach means something, because you might solve a similar problem, but when you solve it in a different way, one of the outcomes, several of the outcomes, are how your customer approaches the problem they solve. More importantly, it's how they feel about solving their problem because of the way they solved it with you. Think differently about what you bring to the table and how you bring it. Because that's the only way anybody ever stands out. When you sit back and look at popular culture, particularly music, let's stay with that metaphor. Where do the big trend changes come from? When the biggest act in the world, whether it's U2 or Beyonce or Taylor Swift or whoever it is that you're out there following, what is it that they do that sets that new trend, that sets them apart? They bring something tangibly different. Usually it's a relatability. Sometimes it's a tremendously different sound. I think back to the Nirvanas and the Soundgardens and the Pearl Jams of the early 90s and how the culture was looking for something different from the hair metal that they had become accustomed to, right? Sometimes it's drastically different. It's a real disruptor. Other times, it's just a different way of connecting, a different way of relating. And when that connection, when that relation means something, when it is tied to who that act is, when it's something deeply personal, when it's something tied to their own integrity, that's when the biggest impact is made. So I want you to think about how you are approaching your sales career. I want you to think about how you are selling your product, your service, your solution, however you want to refer to it. And I want you to think about whether or not you're just checking all the boxes, because as long as it looks like you're doing your job the way people would expect that job to be done, then you're off the hook, right? Well, being off the hook might keep you from getting fired, but I don't know that it's going to lead you to the success that you want to find. So I want you to think about how you can bring a little more of you to the table in your sales process, because that's the thing that no one else can copy. Features, benefits, patents, and IP law, that stuff expires after a while. Look at all the generic medication that's out there. Those new game-changing drugs are on the clock as soon as they hit the market. But what you bring to the table, nobody else can copy. That's why you never sell better than when you sell like you. Don't try to be like everybody else. Don't try to raise your game to the level of mediocrity. Stick your neck out. Do something that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, but might just work. As we wrap into the end of the year here, I want you to think about how you might bring a little more of that to your business, to your sales process in 2024. If it feels scary, you're in the right direction. And what I will share with you quickly here, because this video is getting a little longer than I intended it to be, is that it's those moments. Those are the moments where you wonder if, man, has it come to this? Do I need to give up? Nothing seems to be working except there's something I'm holding back on. It just feels like I'm not allowed to. But the biggest impacts, the biggest changes in careers happen when you feel like you've just reached the end of your line and you need to try this. It's almost like a Hail Mary. You just need to try this last-ditch effort so you can say you did it all. And that's usually when magic happens. It's happened to me multiple times in my career. If you're lucky, it'll happen to you a couple of times in your career too. And then maybe you won't feel so desperate before you get to that point. You'll recognize that resistance. You'll recognize that frustration as an opportunity instead of an obstacle. Thanks again for being here. I hope you like these videos. I like them. I like to think out loud. I like to talk to cameras. Hopefully there's someone on the other side watching. And I hope this made an impact on you. If it did, please share it with somebody. This is a big concept. You're going to hear me dig more into it in the next coming months, years, because I think it's substantial and I think you need to hear it. I'll talk to you again next week.